The other hot take that I wanted to discuss was, and I think this will lead us kind of nicely into our last section as well before questions. Mongrel said he's not competing in the Cash Cup this weekend. Not playing this. You can read that word yourself. You can read the second half of that yourself. Actually, there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't necessarily want to say, but basically his apparent argument is that everyone's dying right away in these games. The end zones are not fulfilling. There's like 20 people alive after the first circle. So basically, what happens is you have a bunch of fights, and then for the next 10 to 15 minutes, you're basically playing let's traverse the Fortnite map. And, you might run into one other person or one other duo or whatever it is, or trio or whatever you're playing, but everyone's gone and the map is barren, and it just becomes like this, let's mine for 15 minutes, bringing you back to the good old days of Fortnite when people would just sit around and mine for the first 10 minutes of the game. And that's kind of what it feels like in the mid game right now. And I don't think Mongrel's alone in kind of being frustrated in how not necessarily fun that feels. I think a lot of the competitive Fortnite players at the highest levels, especially, have become addicted to that end game state with, a small circle and 50 people left, and everybody's just kind of trying to kill each other. And it's just this insane, chaotic war zone that almost looks like, the Fortnite version of a world war, where you just have guns and bullets flying everywhere, and people are holed up in certain areas and shooting at each other, and you can't even stick your head out without getting shot at, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that he's decided that he's going to sit this one out. I haven't seen too many other pros kind of echoing the sentiment, but I think it's not as rare as it might seem.
I think it's a smart idea for him to sit out. Now he can just rake in 100K viewers for just having a viewership party for the Cash Cup itself. But in all honesty, I see his frustration. This reminds me of a dark day in Fortnite where you would play at any game mode or any solo really, and it would be 20 alive at the end of the first zone, like a regular solo game. And I'm like, oh my, it's just those were so taxing to get through. You had to just spend a lot of mid game just traversing, doing a whole lot of nothing. Yep. So I see his frustration because he is a very fun player to watch, and watching him try and just mine for 10 minutes, that's definitely not something that I imagine that he wants to, worry about doing it. Make some extra cash on and get some extra subs on Twitch and just host a viewing party for it instead. Don't play in it in that case.
Yeah, it's not a terrible idea. But it's interesting that he's going to sit this out. I mean, these guys, esports pros, their careers are so short that, personally, I think any opportunity you have to kind of make some money, cement yourself. I mean, obviously, he's already very well established as one of the best players in all of Europe. But still, any ability and any opportunity that you're given to kind of cement that and to rake in some extra cash, I think you should take. But
right,
what do I know? I'm just a lowly commentator, a pundit on the side of things.
That's all. That's all we are. All.
Relegated to the sidelines. But I think this kind of opens up the floor for what is our last topic of the night here in terms of the state of the game. So I know we don't have too much time left, but I kind of want to get your thoughts and your impressions on, where the game is right now, maybe, overall, as well as kind of in context and in comparison to a couple weeks ago when we kind of left off. And I think that was, unless I'm missing an episode in my brain, I believe that was an episode where we both rated at significant points for significant lengths about
things
we were not very happy with.
I'm sure the hiatus frightened a few of you listening because you probably thought that we just got up and quit after that. But I'm glad you mentioned that, Dave, because I was just thinking that those few weeks off, that was a good thing because I had a little bit of time to breathe and, relax on everything. And I realized, the way that the game is moving right now in its current state, they're still trying to try different things with the competitive and make sure that everybody in every region is in a fair competitive environment. Because, man, a lot of people were saying, don't forget the World Cup was decided in 6 games, which is insane to think about. Just 6 games solely. It's wild. So being able to have all these different avenues that you can compete with and try and expand your brand and your skills and, also trying to get on that board of highest played Fortnite players, it'd be nice too. So, I mean, there's so many players that are still sticking with it. That can see that there's still so much more that needs to be done with Fortnite. Why would players walk away if they're in such a great spot? Skill wise with the game. It's tough to learn another game. Just because you're a pro player in one game, if you're labeled as a pro gamer, yes, that means you're usually well rounded in all kinds of games, but a lot of the times you can't just go right into another game and become a pro player in that game. It's very different, especially for Fortnite. Fortnite is a very unique game, as we know. So there's no other build shooters, nothing like it, right now, as far as the battle royales go. Even like battle royales, the other ones out there, PUBG, Apex Legends, things like that. So, this game, third person, totally different on so many other levels. So players right now are sticking with it because they're still having fun, I think, with the game, if they're able to deal with a lot of the crap that goes on. Because I feel like there's like a week or two of just like absolute, like, this game, I can't stand it. The meta always shifts regardless of what happens when it comes to the mechs, when it comes to this, when it comes to that. Everything gets shifted in a certain way, and really that's all what the players are now kind of like working towards. But it's still hard when you still have all these curveballs thrown at you. It's in esport unlike any other, so you got to give Fortnite its props for that. It is definitely a tier 1 esport because it's just something so damn unique at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely really, really unique. I think, the meta shifts are something that every game has to deal with, and I think players, are kind of becoming a little bit accustomed to them.
Right, in the most extreme way, Fortnite has to do it, because a lot of games do, but Fortnite does it right before events and such.
And I mean, most games shift the metas by kind of tweaking the stats on items or champions' abilities or something, right? So like an example would be like, okay, we're going to slightly nerf the shotgun damage and slightly buff the SMG damage and see if that gets more players to elect to use an SMG close range rather than a shotgun, or, the other way around, or slightly buff this assault rifle or nerf that one, and kind of really try and tinker with things that way. Fortnite is like, we're just dropping bombs in here every week. We're giving you new items. We're giving you new this. Overall, I'll say this season, I have not been the biggest fan of. I think, they kind of put themselves. It's tough when the first thing and the thematic approach to the season is such a off the mark kind of strategy in terms of like the mechs and stuff, because they set all the season challenges, right, to have that stuff in it. And they're not going to just take that out. So that kind of put them in a really bad spot. I think, though, recently they have been making good, positive changes. Stuff that, like the shield. Oh, my God. Shield bubbles. Yes, there we go. Mm-hmm. The shield bubbles, I think, are good. Bringing back the bouncer, I think, are good. They nerfed the mechs into oblivion, and, they're still there and they're still suck to kind of encounter, but they're nowhere near as oppressive as they were at the beginning of this season. So I think. And the other big thing, I think, is this matchmaking change, which I think, it might go overlooked, but I think this is really going to set Fortnite up in the future to kind of be able to accomplish both goals simultaneously, where they can help those newer players or those players who are significantly worse at the game get those Ws. Meanwhile, the players who are really, really good at the game can have a competitive game that feels stable. We didn't even talk about the Batman thing. I think this is pretty awesome. Bringing Batman into the game, and you mentioned Gotham City kind of being where Tilted Towers used to be, and it's pretty cool.
I said I would never buy another skin, man, and then they got to release the Dark Knight skin.
They got to release the Batman skin. It's like they were listening to you or something.
Come on.
So yeah, I think right now the game is in a much better place than it was when we left off with the show last time. Yep. Although I would still like, the focus to be, there still needs to be a little bit of a work. I think there needs to be a focus on the competitive side and kind of really make it so that, like this matchmaking change, find other ways that are less obtrusive to the people who really are trying to dedicate themselves to this game and take this game super seriously. Things that can help the newer players without hamstringing those players at the top end. So that's kind of how I see Fortnite right now. But if you guys, at home are watching, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Where you think the game is, what you think Fortnite's doing right, what you think it's doing wrong, what are the problems? Kind of all that being said, if you guys have questions for us next week, you can tweet them at, myself, you can tweet them at Tyler, you can tweet them at UGC all week long. We'll kind of accumulate those and we will discuss them next week.